of this big debate about how can China, the UK, EU, I suppose, and the US play active roles in safeguarding global governance, etc. To do that, we're going to have to fight our way through a very difficult, complex minefield of tensions at the moment, and let's speak frankly here. This is a time where a lot of the hope for the big powers in the world, the United States, China, the European Union, others, the idea of us all working together towards common challenges, which I think was maybe the hope in the 90s, early 2000s even, is definitely something that's moved into an area of skepticism or lack of hope, I suppose, today. Why? And let me just set the scene, and maybe this will give a chance then for you to moderate around others to bring in this conversation. I know we talked a little bit about sort of Trump and Brexit at the beginning, and the fact is the United Kingdom and the US have both epitomized together a backlash against globalization. I think there's an irony, especially as you're Center for China and Globalization, it's an irony that the two Anglo-Saxon powers, which had defined globalization as an era of opening, of allowing markets to have free reign, of opening to trade, to investment, to technology, to movement of people, all of those facets of globalization that Britain and America were the archetypal champions of. There's a reason why the Anglo-Saxon model is always described there, and often in a negative way when our French colleagues and others have talked about the Anglo-Saxon model. But it's ironic that the two countries that led it are now leading the retreat, and I'm saying that under the advisement of colleagues from the British Embassy here. I will explain what I mean by that in a moment, because obviously global Britain is meant to be the opposite of that. But I think it is a fact that both in the United States and the United Kingdom, the two countries that took globalization in its purest, most undiluted form, are the two countries that are now experiencing, politically at least, the strongest backlash against it. The difference is that America's interpretation of it is to say, given that large segments of our population have not benefited from globalization, America has decided to go America first and to move to a transactional approach in which America can exercise its power and apply it in a format that allows it to use its very clear strengths in the global economy and on the world stage. Britain has used a phrase which has not been certainly rejected by this government, but was the phrase of Brexit, of taking back control. That the British government should not leave itself within one of the epitomes of globalization, which was the European Union, an area where you reduced barriers to trade, to investment, where you pooled sovereignty. But we are in a political phase where the country is trying to take back control at this time, rather than leave itself open to all of the different aspects. If you want me, I can put it in front of you if you want. If that saves time, I'll put it right there. It is a situation where, as I said, the United Kingdom, I think, is trying to think about how it can determine the terms on which it engages with globalization in a more discreet way than being totally open to globalization as an unadulterated good. But that's where the similarities end. I will obviously say a lot more about Brexit if we need to later on, and what I think Britain might or might not mean by global Britain. The two countries are very different. The US, I would say, is uniquely self-sufficient. And you all know what I mean by this, through a whole range of both geographic, resource, people, military and economic tools. The United Kingdom, like most other European states, and like many states around the world, is most definitely not self-sufficient. It is hugely dependent on international exchanges of all forms, and hugely dependent, therefore, on a system of a rule of law around which to be able to operate. So the UK, like most of its European neighbours and EU member states, faces a huge dilemma. We are allies of the United States. We are all liberal democracies and interested in trying to sustain liberal democracies and their strength around the world. We're dependent on the United States for our security, as are many other countries, not just European, around the world. But the UK, like other small and medium-sized states, believes and relies on the international rule of law to manage interdependence. It relies on international institutions. It relies on the infrastructure of interdependence in order to be successful. There's a debate about how successful one can be extracting oneself from one of those agents, which is the European Union, but the UK as the 5th largest, 6th largest, 7th largest, depending on where India and France are at any particular time. Nonetheless, it is one of the big players in the world, but still it is one that relies on systems of interdependence for its strength. So this dilemma means that Europe faces the schism between the United States and China that we see today that is defining international affairs as a dilemma. Here we are, an ally with the United States on the one hand, being called upon, however, to move away from China, move away from thinking of China as part of the interdependence that we ourselves have been such champions of for so long. We are facing, as Europeans, whether British or other continental Europeans, the dilemma of whether we could continue committing to an idea of coexistence between the Chinese system and the systems of liberal democracies that Americans and Europeans are championing together, but that now Europeans are being asked to kind of take a loyalty test. You know, can you be a champion of the West and also be helping China continue to integrate into the global economy? Is that an impossible circle to square or not? I was on a panel at a conference with Neil Ferguson recently in Seoul, and we ended up discussing what would the non-aligned movement look like in a new economic Cold War. Because that is the question today. In the Cold War, it was quite clear which side Europeans stood on, and Japanese and others who were part of the Western Alliance, Australia, etc. But if it is a new economic Cold War that has been announced, and I would say the Trump administration, and I'd say quite a few other Americans beyond the Trump administration itself, view China's rise as antithetical to global stability in the future, then Europeans have to decide whether they're aligned to that viewpoint or not. I'm not going to provide all the answer, I'll let others come to that in a minute. But let me just finish up by talking about some options rather than simply analysing the situation. I think there are at least 3 areas in which Europeans will be testing, and I use this word, testing, whether partnering with China is a way forward such that Europeans can argue that partnering with China is leading to a safer, more stable, secure world, one in which the benefits of interdependence can be secured. They are, number one, helping the growth of less developed economies around the world, in Africa, in parts of Central Asia, South Asia. And in shorthand, the question is, will China's development model of infrastructure investment and of engagement with the political systems of those countries be ones that promote sustainable development in those countries or ones that promote unsustainable development? And you all know what I'm saying here in terms of the shorthand. Is the Belt and Road Initiative going to be supportive of some of the goals that the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank has taken on board, or will it be more mercantilist in its approach, politically as well as economically? Europeans, I think, would like to support that process, and Brits as well, not least because the Brits want to finance or help the financing of Belt and Road, but it's a test, and we'll see which way it goes. Secondly, climate change, an area where obviously Europeans and Chinese have set themselves up as the two forces that will ratchet constructive answers forward. Is that sustainable or not? A lot will depend on, again, whether China is promoting that move towards more climate-friendly energy policy, not just in China, but beyond China as well. There's no point doing it at home if you're not promoting it abroad at the same time. Britain has been heavily criticized for its import-export, its credit guarantee bank has been funding, increased fossil fuel investments around the world. Is that an intelligent thing to be doing at the same time as the UK is claiming it will be carbon neutral by 2040, 2050? And then there's the big question of whether we can collaborate on high technology. 5G, it has become a debate about Huawei, but it is much more than just one company, obviously. But there is a big test here. What is the model under which European countries can find that middle route between complete rejection that the Trump administration is proposing in one or two other countries, and the kind of middle way that I think the British government is trying to find? To put my cards on the table, I think trying to find the middle way is the right route, but we can talk more about that later on. But this could apply to biotechnology, this could apply to all sorts of other issues as well. So my closing point is, while Britain and Europeans test these areas, we're going to find it very hard to move forward in any constructive way into anything meaningful without institutions to support it. And as you are the Center for China and Globalization, and a lot of our discussions about global governance is about institutions. And here, there's at least 5 areas. And again, I'm going to use these as things for others to pick up on, rather than, as I have, I think, the privilege of not having to come up with complete answers. I'll put things on the table, and then my colleagues from all of the various institutions can have a go at them. Number 1, will China engage in a real WTO upgrade, a meaningful one, that actually, in which I think China forgoes some of the current benefits it has of being both a developed and a developing country? And the EU-China Comprehensive Bilateral Investment Treaty, which I mentioned briefly on the way here, could be an interesting gateway through to some of the changes on the WTO. Number 2, can we trust each other on cyber and intellectual property protection? As much as people might want to find a middle way on engaging Chinese technology companies in 5G or whatever, if we can't find a way to trust each other on cyber and intellectual property, the forces politically to block that will win. And I don't know whether there's, to be provocative here, there are international institutions, structures, informal arrangements that could be developed, but if they're not, they need to be. The principle of international rule of law in security is the kind of third and last area I want to put out there. Europeans are hugely worried about America's withdrawal from the INF, the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty. But there's going to be no such treaty unless it is more inclusive and global in the future. And maybe Andrew and others, Alexander will have things that they can comment on this point. But China is going to have to find a way to get involved, and Europeans will need to be involved in this process as well if we're going to have that sense of security. And the South China Sea becomes an area in which, again, Europeans find themselves caught between two stools, between their alliance to the United States and their desire to want to have a non-militarized, healthy economic relationship across all of Southeast Asia and Asia as a whole. What kind of confidence and security building measures can be proposed in this area? How can we involve other regional players in ASEAN? What role can the EU and Britain play in what at the moment is the US-China standoff in that area. Getting some progress on the security front, on the trade front, and on the broader technology front. Having institutional structures for those three areas, which at the moment we don't seem to have, that are functioning. If you don't have the institutional infrastructure for that kind of global cooperation, the ability of Britain or other European countries to step up in these tactical areas of climate change, of high-tech development, and supporting developing economies will not be able to move forward. So I'll stop there.